29-year-old Sue Roop was last seen in Bentry, West Virginia on the morning of February 12, 1979. She left a note at home for her children, telling them to go to a neighbor's residence if she wasn't home by the time they got back from school. A neighbor saw her get into a blue vehicle, either a truck with a camper top or a van, at 8:30 a.m. She has never been heard from again. Life had been difficult for Sue in the time leading up to her disappearance. She won custody of her children and child support following a bitter divorce after she found out her husband, Raymond Roop, was having an affair with their teenage babysitter. In the divorce, Sue was awarded custody of their 3 children, Susie, Jessica, and Raymond Jr., along with child support, with the checks coming sporadically, and Sue was struggling to make ends meet. Perhaps most concerning is a series of unfortunate incidents that had recently taken place. She had sustained a serious gash to her head after being run off the road in her vehicle. Her house burned down mysteriously while the children were at their father's, and Sue was spending the night with her sister, and Raymond had taken her to court, attempting to get a portion of the insurance money. She was forced to move with her children into an apartment above a local restaurant. But things were starting to look up. She was expecting to receive $3,000 from the sale of some property in March. She also had a new boyfriend, Peter Brown, who was away in the military, and they wrote letters to each other almost every single day. Monday, February 12, 1979, seemed like an ordinary day for Sue. The mother of 3 prepared the girls for school. Her son had spent the weekend with his father. Sue promised the girls that she would pick up Valentine's and they would make Valentine's Day boxes that evening. When Sue's children got home from school that day, they were expecting to make the Valentine's Day boxes with their mother. Instead, they found a note on the front door from their mother instructing them to go to the neighbor Carol's apartment if she wasn't home. They chose to stay home, eager to work on their Valentine's Day projects. Eventually, their father Raymond arrived, and according to sources, he suspiciously told them that their mother had abandoned them. Other members of the family were eventually alerted of Sue's disappearance. When they came to search the apartment, they found her purse and clothes, along with a money order from Peter. Raymond later said he stopped by the house to pay some back child support as he had just gotten his income tax return. When Sue did not return by Valentine's Day, her father, Eugene McMillian, filed a missing person report with the Gauley Bridge Detachment of the West Virginia State Police. Raymond stated he last saw her on February 10th, 2 days before her disappearance, when he picked up their son for the weekend. In April, the McMillian family turned over a series of letters to the police that Sue had written to Peter. The letters indicated some troubling information. She would write that Raymond was 3 months behind in child support and she planned to take legal action, but that she was very afraid of him. She also said someone had forged 2 checks on her bank account and she knew who had done it and she planned on confronting them. After his divorce from Susan, Raymond had married Christina Hudnell, the babysitter he had been unfaithful with. However, the marriage wouldn't last and they would later divorce. In 2017, Christina said that in 1980, Raymond had told her that he had in fact killed Susan. She stated, he told her he left home that day in their vehicle, but then got into someone else's car, whom she didn't know, and he was driving that car when he killed Susan. For the next 3 decades, Raymond was tried and convicted of a variety of crimes, including the murder of 71-year-old Charles Wood, breaking and entering, possession of a firearm, drug possession, and grand larceny. However, police were never able to prove any involvement in the disappearance of Sue. 9 years later, Sue's family had her declared legally dead. In December of 1993, when a body was found on Bolt Mountain, her family had hoped that it was Sue's and they could get some closure. Detective Steve Tanner began his attempt to match the skeletal remains and the articles found with it with descriptions from missing persons reports. The more he learned about the body, the more he became convinced that the remains were those of Sue. Examination by the medical examiner revealed that the body was that of a female, 5'4" in height, approximately 30 to 45 years of age. Sue was 29 years old and 5'1" at the time of her disappearance. The hip-hugger pants and platform shoes found with the body were indicative of the 70s style. Family members recall that Sue wore a gold ring with a small diamond. The body discovered on Bolt Mountain was found with a gold ring bearing a 1/8 carat diamond. Tanner was convinced that the watch found with the Bolt Mountain body provided one of the strongest links to Sue. The watch was distinctive in that it had a gold face and an undersized silver band. A confidential source had identified the watch as belonging to Sue, but would not make an official statement due to fear of the killer. To confirm the link, Detective Tanner transferred a photograph of Sue wearing her watch and the watch from the body to the FBI, asking if it was possible to determine if it was the same watch that Sue was wearing. Although FBI examiners indicated that the watches were very similar, the photograph was not clear enough for a positive identification. However, the body matched in gender, race, size, age, and clothing and jewelry were in the right style, but he had nothing that he could take to court to prove that the body on Bolt Mountain was that of Sue Roop. In 1995, Detective Tanner was hopeful due to a new process known as mitochondrial DNA testing. This testing could compare the DNA of the skeletal remains to the DNA of Sue's mother and daughters to determine whether the body was in fact Sue's. In 1995, the Raleigh County Commission approved the $5,000 funding for the test. The first tests conducted were inconclusive. Although nothing in the DNA test eliminated Sue as a possibility, there was also not enough evidence to prove that it was her skeleton. In 1996, the skeletal remains were sent to one of the leading DNA specialists in the nation, Dr. Mark Stoneking of Penn State University, for additional mitochondrial DNA testing. Tanner received yet another disappointing answer. The body matched the DNA of Sue Roop's family in 25 of 26 points. Dr. Stoneking felt that the mismatch on the 1 point could be attributed to contamination or other factors. Dr. Stoneking made the following recommendation in his report. If there is sufficient compelling other evidence to support the claim that the remains are those of Sue Roop, then the DNA analysis should be repeated in an independent sample. Today, Sheriff Steve Tanner continues his battle to bring closure to the family of Sue Roop and justice to her murderer. But as of today, this case remains unsolved. On June 2, 1987, Norma and Jeff Henstill picked up their daughter, Tammy Daniel, outside the El Cid Club in Beckley, West Virginia at around 3 a.m. They drove Tammy to her home in Stanford, West Virginia, and dropped her off after trying to talk her into staying the night with them. However, she refused, and as they pulled up to her trailer, it was obvious that Tammy's husband, Ronald Gene Daniel, had already gone to bed. All was dark and the door was locked. Tammy's parents asked if she wanted them to go knock on the windows to try and wake Gene up, but Tammy only told them that they better not. She said she would sleep in the tent in the front yard instead. Tammy's parents drove away, but after a short distance, her mother made her father turn around and go back because she didn't want to leave Tammy asleep in the yard. When they arrived, they heard what sounded like a door closing, and they looked around the yard and couldn't find Tammy, so they assumed Gene had woken up and let her in. They left and never saw their daughter again. The next day, Tammy's parents went back to her home and she was gone. Gene said he had asked her to leave and he didn't know where she was. 4 days later, when no one had heard from Tammy, her parents reported her missing. Gene had borrowed a vacuum cleaner from a neighbor on June 5th, 3 days after Tammy's disappearance. When he returned it, it had a foul smell and there was a sticky substance on it. The police took the vacuum for testing and determined it was blood-stained and the blood was Tammy's type. When they searched Gene and Tammy's home, they found a stain on the bedroom carpet and possible blood on the carpet padding and the floor underneath. Gene could offer no explanation on how it got there. Gene has always maintained his innocence in Tammy's disappearance and said he thought she left on her own accord. In January 1989, Gene was convicted of murdering Walter Morgan in a July 1988 shooting. He admitted to the shooting but claimed self-defense at the trial. He served a prison sentence and has since been released. Gene was indicted for Tammy's murder in the 1990s. However, the indictment was dismissed for lack of evidence. There was also another problem with the case. Fred Zane was the lead serologist, which is a bodily fluid scientist, at the time of the case. Zane eventually became known for using flawed methods in testing bodily fluids, and it was eventually discovered that he misstated evidence, falsified lab requests, and reported impossible results to the courts. So even if Gene was convicted, they could use Zane's flawed methods as a way to have the conviction overturned. In the months prior to Tammy's disappearance, she'd been photographed with blackened eyes and had to undergo a splenectomy to remove a damaged spleen. Tammy has never been found, but foul play is suspected in her case due to the circumstances involved. She has since been declared legally dead, and as of today, the case remains unsolved. On October 24, 1987, 21-year-old Melissa Moreland left her home in Berkeley Springs near Paw Paw, West Virginia, where she lived with her parents. Her parents were under the assumption that she would be spending the night with a friend, completely unaware that as she left the house, it would be the last time they would ever see her. At this time, the identity of whom Melissa was supposed to be staying with is unknown. The last time anyone reported seeing her was later that night with friends at a former High's gas station located on Winchester Street. Although Melissa lived with her parents at the time, she was known to leave for a few days in a row to stay with friends. Therefore, she wasn't immediately reported missing. In November 1985, almost 2 years prior to her disappearance, Melissa was attacked by Dwight David Walls. He also assaulted another woman. Both females testified against him in court, and he was charged with sexual abuse and assault, but reached a plea agreement with the prosecution and pleaded guilty to unlawful wounding. Walls was sentenced to a year in jail, but he could have faced up to 40 years in prison if he was convicted of the original charges. He was pardoned and released only 4 months into his sentence. Melissa disappeared several months later. It isn't clear whether her disappearance is related to the prior assault or whether Walls is a suspect in her case. An in-depth investigation was conducted by then Sheriff William Spitzer into her disappearance and then later by Sergeant Larry Bradley of the West Virginia State Police during the 90s. Dozens of people were interviewed during the re-investigation. Several leads were followed and locations searched for a possible body, but nothing was ever found. They did, however, develop a few persons of interest from these leads. In 1999, the FBI, along with Sergeant Robert Cooper of the West Virginia State Police, reopened the cold case but would be unsuccessful in solving it. In 2014, Sheriff Casey Barr, an investigator in Frederick County, Virginia, and Captain John Eckerson of the Hampshire County Sheriff's Department received information and searched a location near Augusta, West Virginia, but found nothing. The sheriff says someone, somewhere, knows something about the case. Her father has since died, not knowing what happened to his daughter. Little information is available in her case, and she has basically vanished, but authorities do believe that she is most likely deceased by now. As of today, the case remains unsolved. 24-year-old Luke Stout would go missing on July 18, 2012, after leaving his home on Hickory Flat Road outside of Buchanan, West Virginia. Luke was still living with his mother, Elizabeth, because she was terminally ill, and he provided care for her, with Luke's 3 brothers stepping in sometimes to help. Luke had forgotten to pay his car insurance, so it had subsequently lapsed, and he had been using a bicycle for transportation. A day or two before his disappearance, the handlebars on his bicycle had broken while he was out riding. He abandoned the bike in Buchanan, but planned to return for it later. On the day of his disappearance, Luke planned to meet with his friend Dylan and bring him a green bicycle frame with 1 tire on it in exchange for his help to fix his abandoned bicycle. Luke's mother claims that Dylan called and told Luke he was sending a ride to go to the end of the driveway and wait. Luke told his mother he didn't know who the driver was, but Dylan said the driver would see the bike and recognize him. The person that was sent to pick up Luke has never been identified. A few days after his disappearance, his brothers found his bicycle leaning against a trailer behind a CVS in Buchanan. It had not been repaired. There is no information as to whether Luke knew the person who lived there, though he would have been familiar with the area. The brothers notified police, assuming an officer would want to question nearby residents about possible knowledge of Luke. They were met with disappointment as the police simply told them that they should load up the bike and take it home. It was obvious that the bike's handlebars hadn't been fixed, so whatever happened to Luke that day, we know he never made it to town to fix his bicycle. It's also unknown who left the bicycle in that trailer park. It could have been Luke, but it also could have been the clue that broke the case wide open. But the police were not dispatched out to the area as requested. To the family's knowledge, they never questioned the friend Dylan that he was supposed to be meeting up with either. Prior to his disappearance, Luke told people that Rodolfo Villagomez Correa, also known as Chino, had threatened him and held a gun to his forehead. His mother described a barrel mark on his forehead that she had seen. Luke had attempted to file a report with the police but was turned away. Correa pleaded guilty in 2015 in connection with the January 2012 disappearance and murder of Joshua Oberg. The victim's body wasn't found until July 23, 2012, 5 days after Luke's disappearance. Because Oberg was having an affair with Correa's wife, Correa hired 2 of his wife's cousins to kill him. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Correa was also in a lot of trouble for multiple firearms found in his possession and re-entering the United States illegally. Luke also knew Correa's wife, and there were rumors that they were seeing each other at some point prior to his disappearance. This has not been verified, and Correa has not been linked to his case. Elizabeth and Luke's brother Kenny would go to a Buchanan City Council meeting and make pleas for information on the case, but it led to a confrontation with Mayor Kenneth Davison. Elizabeth wanted to know why only 1 search had taken place and why the FBI had not been involved since Correa had put a gun to her son's head. Davison said he didn't want to respond because he didn't know anything about the case, but then he said, "The police's story and your story don't match up." Elizabeth would question the mayor on how he could know the stories didn't add up if he didn't know anything about the case. Ultimately, Elizabeth and Keeney were escorted out of the building after Keeney began to have an outburst. It's uncharacteristic of Luke to leave without warning. His family also says several local organizations offered to help, but the West Virginia State Police refused. Luke was very devoted to his family and to taking care of his terminally ill mother. However, as of today, his case remains unsolved. 15-year-old Michael Allen Dillard was last seen on January 12, 2018, helping his mother carry in wood at their home in Calvin, West Virginia at 4:30 p.m. He ran behind the house and has never been heard from again. He was carrying only $2 and he left his cell phone behind. Michael's older sister, Brittany, stated that on January 10th, 2 days before his disappearance, her brother said he was having the best day of his life. He had hung out with a friend, gone to church, and was in a really good mood. The next day, Thursday, the good mood continued. But by the time he came home from school on January 12th, he seemed depressed. He and his mother went to his sister's home a few miles away, but he would barely speak to her. When he and his mother returned to their house, and after helping carry things inside, he suddenly ran behind the house without saying a word and never returned. Within a few minutes, his mother called his father to come home, and by 5 o'clock, they had called police to report him missing. Sergeant Bruce Clendenin with the West Virginia State Police said that officers responded to the Dillard's house right away. There was a storm coming, and they knew they only had a few hours until it was too dark to see. The overnight temperatures in the area dropped to 22 degrees below zero, and it was raining and foggy. Michael's family looked for him all night, but never found him. Police searches using helicopters, dive teams, bloodhounds, and search crews turned up empty. Although a week and a half had passed, Michael's jacket was found about 300 yards from his house. Private investigator John Bonazzo said, "The jacket that was found concerns me. It could have either been planted there later because that area had already been searched, or there's also a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing that occurs during hypothermia, where people start to undress because the body tricks you into thinking you're warm." Bonazzo said hypothermia is definitely a possibility in this case because of the harsh winter weather conditions of that night. Michael has suffered from severe depression in the past and spent almost a year in a treatment center for his condition. He was released from the treatment facility on December 19th, only 3 weeks prior to his disappearance. Some agencies classify Michael as a runaway and state he may be in North Carolina or still in the local area, but the circumstances of his disappearance are unclear. His family still seeks answers, and as of today, this case remains unsolved.